Hello everybody, this is Noe with Walk with Yah Ministry. Deliverance ministry mostly that focuses on getting those that are spiritually oppressed freed from their spiritual oppression so that way they can do whatever they're called to do in the kingdom, preferably. Really not interested in getting people set free to go back into their worldly, earthly ways if it's not really to build up his kingdom on earth. Walk with Yah also teaches on spiritual warfare as well as different biblical aspects, and such as worship, music. Starting to get a little bit more into that. Anyways, let's get into tonight's topic because there is a lot of stuff to cover and we need to get rolling. So, what we're going to get into tonight is going to explain much of the craziness that is going on in the world today. Yah's people, God's people, as a whole, some people would call that his church, his assembly, congregation, overall, has been fairly complacent in allowing evil to ramp up to the point where evil is almost seemingly taking over the world. Now, I'm not saying this to be condemning, although it may sound that way. I'm just stating how it kind of looks, just as a fact, just calling it as it is, if you will. Now, as you probably know, when life is good, it causes his people, it causes us to be complacent, to be lazy, actually. Have you ever heard of the marketing line, maybe not the first person, the first company or whatever, but the one under them that says, we're number 2, but we try harder. And the enemy's really been at work for a long time, ramping up for this. Now, obviously, this has been no surprise to Yah, God, as he knew that, all this stuff would happen, as even he had John, the apostle, penned the book of Revelation, which is the revelation of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, the Anointed One. Now, while that does give us some comfort, we also know that at some point, times are going to get really bad, because that's what the Bible says. But it's hard to win a battle that you don't even know that you're in. And we've been in a battle for a long time. And so we've just been, focusing on our little worlds, myself included at times. So I've also heard people say that, that this is just history repeating itself. Well, sure. That's true up to a point. It is history repeating itself. Until it isn't. Because at some point in time, the book of Revelation becomes a reality. So in Genesis, when we start there, we kind of go back and, we're seeing Cain and Abel, that type of stuff. We're seeing, brother against brother, person against person, if you will. And then it's family against family, and then kingdom against kingdom, and then nation against nation, etc., etc. And now the world is a much smaller place. And so this is happening on a global scale, to the point where Walk with Yah believes that Satan wants to ultimately control people's free will, to where most people feel they have no choice but to accept the mark of the beast. Now, most complacent churchgoers are going to have a hard time grasping what I'll be talking about tonight and in the next part of the series, because they are still very earthly focused. And I will admit, deliverance can get deep and messy really quick. So this message won't be for the spiritually timid. And if you don't believe the things that I'm saying, that I'm talking about, I suggest that you go and read 1 Corinthians 2, 6 through verses 16, where it talks about the spiritual matters being foolish to the carnal man, or Hebrews 5, verses 11 through 14, which again, that talks about the people being on the milk of the word, even though they should be teachers, that they're not mature, whose senses have been trained to practice to discern both good from evil. And then even John 3:12, which that was the whole Nicodemus conversation that Yeshua had with Nicodemus. And in that verse he says, if you don't believe when I talk to you about earthly matters, how are you going to believe when I speak to you about heavenly matters, about spiritual things? And so, again, Walk with Yah tends to walk a lot in the spiritual aspect, obviously using the Bible as a foundation. That's always the case. That always has to be foundational. Now, before we get started, if you haven't already, I suggest that you get connected to Walk with Yah. You can go to the website and you can sign up for the newsletter, which I try to get out every quarter, but a lot of times there's a lot of things going on. Or you can get connected through Rumble, MeWe, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. You can connect with Walk with Yah on any of these platforms. Also, while I'm talking, please feel free to hit me up with any type of comments, questions, things that you have, and I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. And just so you know, if you don't type anything in, I don't know that you're here. So I welcome the comments, appreciate the comments. I encourage the community feedback, because there's things that you may have to add that might be valuable. Now, let me continue. In the Walk with Yah live stream that aired on 2023, I had to count this on my fingers, January, February, March, April, May 18th. In the Walk with Yah live stream number 49, called Of This World and the WWY Session Files number 1, in that teaching, at the very beginning, I gave several verses where Yeshua, Jesus, stated that he and we are not of this world. But many people are still stuck in looking back on what the Bible has to say, what it has to say, which is good to do, yes, but many people don't also understand that the Bible is very future focused as well. Maybe not with as much details, but this time that we have in the earth in the span of eternity isn't really that much. I believe that this time on earth is really to grow our human spirit, because that's what's going to continue thriving, living after we leave this body. How do the soul and spirit intermingle? That's above my pay grade. Can't say much on that. Anyways, but many people are stuck in their old-time religion and their man-made doctrines. Of course, that's with the help of demons, as that's what 1 Timothy 4 verse 1 talks about, the doctrine of demons. But we'll be learning about his word for eternity. So I think it's probably not a good idea to think that we've almost topped out on our understanding of his creation and how things work. Because the spirit realm is much different than what we experience in the earthly world. And I know people are not comfortable with the unknown, but that's kind of where faith comes in, right? In 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 23 says that we are spirit first, soul, and then body, in that order. Even in the live stream that I did back in 2022, 08/18, on the live stream number 34 called Money Matters, towards the end, I talked about the soul trade and how that works, because the enemy harvests our life force energy and uses that to, in a negative way, to grow their kingdom of darkness, to use it against us. They use our own energy against us. We just have to understand that the spirit world affects the earthly world and vice versa. So just know that all of the heavens, the first, second, third heavens, they're all closely intertwined. You can also see a reference to that in Acts 2, verse 17 through 18. But tonight, I want to start discussing some of how this works. Again, as we're talking on this teaching, this live stream number 56, Illuminati survivor programming, I want to talk about how this kind of works. What has the enemy put into place? What have we been missing? And so, because it's right in front of our faces, but most of us miss it. I did, and I still do, to be quite honest, until I started getting into deeper deliverance. Some of my clients that I had been ministering to, I was noticing, hey, like after 6 months, like we're hardly making a dent, even though they still wanted to continue. I guess they were getting something out of it, but I knew there was frustration on their part. We were just hoping that something would break. Again, sometimes deliverance, it does take a while, until we finally figured out some of them were actually programmed. And I'll talk about more about that in a minute. And so I do need to clarify some terms before I do go forward. Now, every person experiences some type of soul fragmentation, or more commonly understood as disassociation. And people that have severe disassociation have what is called as dissociative identity disorder, or DID. And at that point, they can have several different personalities that use the same body. And so these different personalities can have different names, different likes, different dislikes. They can know different languages. They can have different functions, etc. If the main presenter part, the main person that's up all the time, let's say they just finished eating and another part came up, they might be like, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten. Or perhaps that other part, DID part, likes smoking, but the main presenter part doesn't. So anyways, it's basically like having an array of different people that share the same body, and they may not be aware of each other. Or it just may only be one way where one of the parts is aware of the other ones, but not the other way around. Now, these people, some of which believe in the Bible, go to church, most times cannot share with other people, even in church. Otherwise, they'll get ostracized for various reasons and traumatized even further. Severe trauma, such as parental abuse, sexual abuse, etc., can cause these DID personalities to get created, to emerge. For them to emerge as these people's minds are looking for a way to escape their horrendous condition. They will actually cause their mind, their soul to split, so that way that part of their soul can hold on to the trauma so that the core presenter can function as normally as possible. This is actually a God-given coping mechanism that he put in us. Now, however, there are some people that intentionally create these DID personalities in other people. It's actually done on purpose, many times by world governments. And you might ask how. Well, if your family is in the military or the politics, that makes it easier for the government to get access to you and your family. But it can still happen in churches, daycares, organizations that are 501c Christian organizations, so they say, doing missionary work. Just remember that trust should be earned, but not given. And so we can't just trust everyone that says that there's something, because again, we have to know that the Bible says that we're to judge a person by the fruit, but fruit takes a while to develop. And so, just a little help there for you. Don't trust, just because a person looks good on the outside, doesn't mean that they're that on the inside. Now, some of this DID work that's going on, some of this is done by groups, satanic ritual groups, SR groups, that do this ritual abuse, this RA, some people call it ritual abuse. Now, whether that's, a coven of warlocks and witches that are playing around, or maybe even by the Freemasons, because often it's very tied to Freemasonry. But there's a number of different people that are very well aware of this, and they have purposes for doing that, which we'll get into. Anyways, but these people are generally categorized as survivors, and I'm not talking about the TV show. That's not what I'm talking about. And survivors are a classification of these people that understand they have been programmed and are usually trying to untangle themselves from their programming if at all possible. Now, if you don't know that you're programmed, you wouldn't call yourself a survivor. But these brave people have gone through some of the worst tortures people can ever imagine or experience. Because again, there are people that are trying to torture them on purpose with the intent of splitting them. And it's torture that is literally out of this world. So much so that most people will discard these survivors if they tell people in church, if they tell people, about their story. Again, they will be discarded as crazy, that they don't know what they're talking about. But this is spiritual warfare, and so yes, it's a lot different than most believers can fathom. I'm not saying that every person's telling the truth. I'm just saying that there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with this, and I'm just trying to help make you aware. Shalom, Madeline. Glad you make it. Now, I've learned some of this stuff by reading writings by Savali. She was a programmer that turned informant. Fritz Springmeier, as well as also from working with others that are currently working with these survivors, from working with survivors myself, again, as I have some clients that are survivors, have been programmed. But there is a writing by Cisco Wheeler. He was a former programmer and a current deprogrammer. And he said in an interview that was posted online in 2019 that in 1968, he was aware of 2 million people that were programmed. And in 2019, he theorized that number could be up to 10 million that are programmed. Obviously, that was, 4 years ago, so the numbers have probably greatly increased. Now, when I say programming, I'm talking about not like going to school and you're learning social protocols, or you're learning the culture or stuff like that. What I'm talking about here is kind of like MK Ultra Monarch programming, where it is done intentionally for the different personalities to have a purpose. Whether that purpose is, being a dark priest, being a sex slave, being someone that's an informant, being in the media, being a political, someone in politics, whether there's all different types of jobs that these people have that they are programmed to do. Anyways, so as I started learning this stuff and getting better to know what to look for in some of my clients, it started becoming more evident to me, to the point where I believe this happens a lot more often than people will believe. Especially as I see the increase of evil just looking at what we see in the news almost every single day. A lot of these crazy stories. And so, hey Tonanette, glad you could make it. Shalom. And so, I believe this is more than just coincidence and happenstance. And I wish I had time to go into all the reasons why I believe that. But we're just going to kind of, again, summarize this, kind of go over this quickly in this first session, more from a earthly standpoint, what's been going on in the world. And the second part of this teaching, this series, we'll kind of get more into the spiritual aspects, the dynamics there. So just going back as a brief history lesson to kind of cover things quickly. Somewhere in the 1940s, towards the end of World War II, the Germans were concerned, hey, if one of their spies was caught and tortured, they would give up national wartime secrets. And so that was a big concern for them. So they learned how to create different personalities within a person. And those different personalities would have different functions, even without the presenter knowing. The presenter is that personality that's controlling the body, most of the time presenting to the outside world. And so, to them, this would be the perfect, secret, hidden weapon that can function in society, but when needed can switch functions as needed. It could be a pastor. It could be a politician. It could be a daycare teacher. These, they're embedded all in our society, I believe. Now, survivor programming, for my understanding, Hitler and many others were very familiar with the occult. So perhaps, along the lines of Enoch 1, maybe they got forbidden knowledge from fallen angels. Just a thought. But let's go back to stuff that is more factual. So these Luciferians, commonly known these days as the Illuminati, have been around for thousands of years. Now, sure, they started out, as from the ancient religions of Egypt, Babylon, Mesopotamia, as Savali writes, reading her writings, and origin of the Druidic cults. And in the past, those, again, thousands of years we're talking. And so they have been growing in spiritual knowledge. It's kind of like today, the witches and warlocks, they haven't had the boundaries that many Bible believers have had. And so they have been able to explore God's creation, not necessarily the way that he intended it, but they have taken his laws, his principles, and they have flipped them on their head to use them for evil. So in many ways, they're way ahead of Christians, believers, Bible believers, that do spiritual warfare. Okay. And so, again, we've been seeing the Harry Potter movies and all this type of stuff, to where nowadays the witches are out in the open. They don't really care because they feel that they're that powerful and have come that far these days. They're not hiding anymore. Anyways, so in the past centuries, you probably have been more familiar with groups such as the Knights Templar, Rosicrucianists, or Rosicrucianism, if you will, just to name a couple. And so what they have done, basically, is they've just combined and organized all those former principles and knowledge. And they've just kind of did it with the purpose of world domination. These people believe that Satan will share their power with him in hell, that they will be gods in hell. They're not scared of death. They feel they have a right to earn, to conquer the world. And unless you stop them, well then, you're not taking their rights away. Now, today this Illuminati philosophy is funded by the wealthy, but is practiced on all social levels of society globally. These people, even hybrids, again, half human, some type of spirit entities, believe they're called to dominate the world, obviously being led by Satan. Those that are higher ups, some people that are in the mid-tier, lower levels, they don't see the big picture because they're very secretive. They don't want people knowing the big picture. And so it's very complicated. So there are also those that believe in Luciferianism. And so basically the difference between, say, Lucifer and Satan is that Lucifer, they see him as an angel of light, meaning, hey, he's really good, he's just misunderstood. Whereas Satan, they know they're pretty much doing the evil, and they're still going to do it anyways. And so, but Lucifer, Satan, same difference, same thing, same person. But for tonight, we're going to start within the past 100 years, more specifically starting World War II era, 1940s. And it is known that Joseph Mengele was one of the scientists under Hitler. He was also known as Dr. Green, Dr. Death, and as well as other World War II Nazi scientists were doing horrendous experiments on those people that they captured during the Holocaust at a minimum. In their experimentation, among other things, they learned how to torment people to the point of creating alternate personalities within these people. Now, some of you might know about Project Paperclip. And so this is basically a CIA project which has been declassified. It's pretty much common knowledge, which is basically at the end of World War II, it was like United States, England, and there was another country that basically they gathered up all these German scientists, realized that they had knowledge that the United States, Britain did not have, and they were like, this information is too valuable, we don't want to lose it. So Project Paperclip was taking those Nazi scientists, sending them to Brazil, wherever, all over the world, and giving them protection, trying to furthering their projects. If you've ever heard me say, NASA is not what you think it is, because NASA, if you ever look at it, a lot of the people that grew NASA, started NASA, that earned all kinds of awards, those were German scientists. They got Pulitzer Prizes and all kinds of stuff like that. The CIA was formed from a lot of these people out of Project Paperclip. I wouldn't doubt NSA, that type of stuff. Okay, so that's Project Paperclip, and then there's Project Monarch. These are two commonly known ones. Project Monarch was basically creating MK Ultra soldiers. Again, different personalities, people that are hiding among society, that just looking at them, you're not going to know. You're not going to know what assignment they have. And I'm sure there's hundreds of other projects that are known or even unknown, but again, those are two fairly well known and unclassified projects. So basically, they have been perfecting their research since the 1940s, roughly, for roughly around 80 years now. So guess what? They're pretty good at it. They're darn good at it. At creating super soldiers that blend in with the rest of society. So at this point in time, they treat us, common people, like cattle, like guinea pigs. And they do experiments on us all the time without telling us. You probably know, that the modern medical hospitals and all that type of stuff was created by the Rothschilds. I don't think it was really created for your health, but more so to experiment and to learn how humans can work so that we humans can be controlled. They wanted to figure out, how do we use this to our advantage? Now, please keep in mind that there are many God-fearing doctors and those from other professions that are very well intended. It's just the people at the top that really run things that really know what's going on. The enemy knows how to twist things to make it seem plausible, believable. After all, again, these people are really great at keeping experts, unless you want to get killed, of course. They're great at disinformation and deception. They're great at human psychology, mass psychology, which is what they're using these days to, again, control the masses. Along with big media, big tech, big pharma, etc. Because that's how they spin their propaganda to make it seem like the survivors, the people that talk against the cabal, if you will, that those people that talk against it, that they're crazy when they're actually telling the truth. Because it seems so far out there. They try to keep the knowledge tampered down. There's a lot of interesting things coming out about the whole Hawaii, directed energy weapons, all that type of stuff. Anyways, so all of this newer technologies, these newer technologies that have been coming out, are more about control, more so than making the life better for you. Obviously, a lot of times when people market stuff, they try to sell you on the good. This is the good that it does, and it's good for this, and blah, blah, blah. And then later we find out that, that wasn't really such a good idea. Such as the recent bout of vaccines and stuff that's going on and is about to go on again, more than likely. But all this newer technology, the centralized digital currency, digital ID cards, AI, Elon Musk's Neuralink, which if you didn't know, that's basically to connect all of us together to where we will, in our brains, we will have a direct connection to the internet, to the global internet. We'll all be connected. So basically, you will have no privacy. They will be they'll be able to probably read your thoughts or interject thoughts, or where you can possibly upload your brain to the cloud. And this is what things that they're working on, have been working on. And that way you can get your brain put into another body to where you can virtually live forever. And I know that sounds weird, but, many times witches and warlocks, they embed themselves into objects like jewelry. And so we see this with Peter. The handkerchiefs that he had, that aprons that were put on other people, that people would get healed. In a sense, his presence was kind of in that. The witches, the warlocks, they do that with, they can curse food, they can curse jewelry. And actually, they can now do this with human spirits. Or with human souls, rather. So if you think about Haitian zombies, and so which have been a while. So some more of the science is transhumanism, singularity, etc. Again, transhumanism to where we will be in part computers, basically. That's singularity. We'll all be connected. We'll all be as one. If you're a Star Trek fan, the whatever they were, the cyborgs, I forgot what their name was. Anyways, so basically all this is saying is Satan wants to control your free will. And if he can't do it spiritually, he'll do it using technology. If you want to know more about that transhumanism, I did a teaching back in July 2021. You can find that on the Walk with the Eye YouTube channel, which talks about soul versus spirit technology in the last days. And so, basically in that teaching, I talk about how God has already equipped us with spiritual gifts. 2 Corinthians 10:3 and 10:4 says, even though we're in the flesh, we don't fight in the flesh, that our weapons are not carnal, but they're spiritual through Elohim, through God. And that's how we overcome, which is why I'm big into spirit activation and people walking out their spiritual gifts, because we have so much packed in us that we don't know what's there. Anyways, have you ever looked or studied the many Illuminati Freemasonry symbols on the number one on the dollar bill? For example, just one example here, under the eye that's in the pyramid, I forgot what they call that, but there's a Latin phrase under that says Novus Ordo Seclorum, which is located just below the pyramid. Literally translates as the New World Order, or the New Order for the Ages. So in other words, this has been going on for a long time. It just didn't happen. So again, I'm just trying to wake people up to what's really going on in this world. I'm not just trying to be weird for the sake of being weird. I do deliverance ministry for a living, so I'm accustomed to this stuff. And again, I try to remind people that we are more spiritual than we are earthly. And we really need to be thinking about that. Again, that's how we win, is by using our spiritual gifts. Now, do you recall in John 17 where Yeshua, Jesus, he talks about, he's like, hey, I'm one with the Father, and he wants his disciples to be one with him. That's John 17 verses 21 and 22. Now, the way I take that is to mean that we don't become God, but that we become whole. That's my understanding at this point. Well, we know that the enemy twists everything in the Bible. So if it's the job of Yeshua to make us whole and to heal the brokenhearted, what do you think the enemy's plan is? To break us down spiritually into as many soul fragments as possible, which is done by severe trauma, near-death experiences, etc. In the Rosicrucianisms, there are some scientists, I forgot the guy's name, they all know about this guy. Anyways, no, let me not go there. have you ever heard of alchemy? So one part of alchemy was basically they wanted to turn lead into gold. And so the thought behind that was you try to break down some type of metallic, whatever, into its most basic components. And then that way you rebuild it into another form, into another object, another matter. Well, basically, they're doing that with us, with our soul fragments. Because in the spirit realm, which is where our soul fragments are, they can use that energy to, again, in that teaching that I talked about, that I did, where was it? The Money Matters. I was talking about the soul trade. And so basically, we kind of get used as like poker chips. Because some demons that might be like, hey, like I'll give you 10,000 souls if you give me that territory. Or that we may use the energy from our soul spirit to power up weapons that they have. To power up shields. They may use us as shields. I know that stuff sounds crazy, but again, this is spirit realm stuff. So well, hey, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yes. Yeah. And so the Nazi scientists that were exported all over the world to work for world governments taught the governments how to do this stuff. Again, we know the CIA that they've been playing with the occult, how to spy on other governments, how to astral project. They would have witches and warlocks. They would astral project. Maybe even try to go to different planets, that type of stuff. And so, if you're a world government, and you know that some other world government has this power and you don't, well then, they have the advantage on you. And so, these world governments all over the world have been wanting to learn how to do this stuff. So they spy and take secrets from one another. So, this is done all over the world by the big governments, not just big governments, but also big religion. Anyways, some of these people that are programmed, either via ritual abuse or, government-sponsored programming, they may not even know that they're programmed. Now, they typically have to go through maintenance to keep the program intact, because if they don't, the mind will try to work on breaking it down. And, sometimes when you're around, when you get older, the person will start experiencing memories. And they'll be like, I don't understand why I'm having these memories, these dreams of being in rituals and being sexually abused, molested, tortured, put in a coffin full of snakes, buried underground. Anyways, but we're going to get more into those details in the second segment of this teaching of how this is actually done. Again, there's a lot there. This is just a basic teaching because this is a very, very complex subject on an earthly level as well as a spiritual level. And I'm just trying to give some people an understanding of where we are in the world, because most people are asleep at the wheel, concerned with their own little world, and I understand it. They have just been purposely being distracted away from the bigger picture of what's really going on. But there's a much bigger picture here that they are trying to keep you distracted from. They have been planning this for a long time, so the hits just keep coming. Again, I read, the highlights of the news daily. I don't read every article. I gather enough, from just the headlines. I'll read a few of them, but And it's just like one thing after another. It's like, can this get any crazier? And the answer is yes, it can. And it is. But I'm doing this teaching for really mostly two reasons. One, to help believers understand how big the spiritual battle is and what we're up against. And two, to help people realize that if they encounter a survivor that discloses their story, and if it seems too real to be true, they may not be lying. You just had the privilege of not experiencing what they had to do. So don't discount the possibility. So I'm trying to help these survivors get support as well because they need it. You know, not to be shunned by Yah's people. Because at this point in time, the amount of healing that has to occur for a single survivor takes years. It is not easy. They are some of the most amazing people. Some of them that have to deal with this, and it affects them on a daily. It affects them in their daily walk. And so some of them I admire. And so now I believe that Yeshua is going to change it up at some point, because basically we're dealing with insurmountable odds right now, as Satan has pretty much taken over the world, setting the stage for the Antichrist, as he's putting in place the world Babylon system everywhere we look. I myself believe that the beast is alive and well, and is a part of the AI. And I mean that earthly and spiritually. That is helping that to usher that in. As you've probably heard me say before, I believe we're in our version of the Exodus 2.0, where the odds seemed so against us, so big, so massive. Just like the Hebrews back then. They were making bricks out of straw, mud. They had nothing going for them. They were going against the biggest power at that time on the planet, Egypt. Pharaoh. They had all their gods. We're kind of in the same place. But this time it's more of a, it's not so much a, he's not so much leading us into an earthly how do I want to say it? It's more about growing our spirit this time around. And so, obviously, I need to work on summing that up better. So, I believe it's going to get much worse. Although I say that without fear, because ultimately, Yeshua is my Savior and my deliverer. And I try to live the Bible daily, so I have a good relationship with Him. And that's where our peace should come from. He already said there's going to be tribulation in the last days before He's coming. So again, this isn't a surprise. That's why I like the spiritual activation, because everything in the Bible that was put there was for us to learn. We might have to learn how to take a staff and hit a rock for water to come out. We might have to pray that, hey, that net that didn't catch any fish, that this time around we're going to catch a whole bunch of fish, or for that axe head to flow up. All that stuff was done because when He's in us, He might lead us to do stuff like that, because those are real people. So I'm just going to end this part one with this. Basically, the Luciferians are trying to create an army of darkness via mind control programming, as they send these people all over the world. And so those that are programmed they have all different types of programming. A lot of them, there's all of them have similar programming, base programming, such as like Armageddon programming or end of the world programming, as there's just thousands of programs because they like to experiment with people. But these people are all over the world. So when you see these groups that are causing chaos, that are starting fires or setting fires in cities, that are, doing this rampant craziness, I'm not saying all of them, but in some of the organized groups, I wouldn't doubt that some of those leaders are programmed. Because there's a lot of people that are just great followers. We really need to be careful who we follow, what company we keep. And so I think history has shown us that. So when the Illuminati types decide the time is right, they'll start releasing these programs on a worldwide scale to cause chaos, destruction, confusion, death, division, etc. Because again, they're feeding off that energy. The unclean spirits use that energy against us. And so, but they're basically setting the stage for the Antichrist to conveniently appear to have a solution. Even as it says in Luke 21 verse 25, when Yeshua is talking about the end times. And there shall be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth anxiety of nations, in bewilderment, at the roaring of the sea and agitation. Men fainting from fear. Some Bibles say that their hearts will fail them. And the expectation of what is coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. So in other words, it will get so bad that people are just going to start passing out because of fear. They're just going to start fainting, falling out. And I don't say this to scare you, but to help you prepare now for what is coming. The truth shouldn't scare us if we have a solid relationship with Yeshua. And I tell you this because somebody needs to. Proverbs 27 verse 6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but profuse or many are the kisses of an enemy. So I'm trying to get people closer to Yeshua, Jesus. Does the nice evangelism work? Yes, it does. For some people, though, they need fire and brimstone. Even in psychology, I think we've learned that fear is a greater motivator than pleasure. I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm just saying it to be biblical. And so again, I think Yeshua, Jesus, knows how to separate his people. He knows how to protect his people. And even if not, it's really not about this life. Because, again, this life on earth is just a short, however long it is. We need to be more concerned about our eternal life. So I think I'm going to stop there with that. Again, I just kind of wanted to talk about this more from a earthly perspective this time around. The next time it's going to be a little bit more out there, if you will. There's a lot to it, and it still boggles me, and I am no expert at all. And so I'm just going to ask, does anyone have any questions at this point in time? Did you find this helpful? Do you think this might be good for someone else to hear or listen to for them to, kind of wake them up? I'm asking that you would share this with other people, this and the next one that we'll do, on September the 21st, in 2 weeks. And so, because this stuff is all around us, And until you learn the language, because they speak a different language, and they speak it right in front of us, and we don't know it. You're probably aware of Yeshua Jesus. He said, he gave the parable of the sower, and his disciples were like, why do you speak in parables? And he goes, because I don't want everyone to know it. Which is really interesting that he said that. But anyways, there is a principle there that the enemy uses. So they talk in coded language right in front of us. It's on the TV, it's on national events, it's on, the Super Bowl, it's on they broadcast it in movies all the time. Like, in a lot of the, Disney, of course, obviously, they're pure evil. But, with the Marvel Comics, all that stuff, they're telling us what they're doing. But they'll do it in such a way to where a lot of people are like, oh, you've been watching too many movies. And so that's actually based off a principle in Amos 3:6, where Yahweh says, I will do nothing unless I tell my prophets. And so they're using that same principle, they just use it in the negative. And so, okay, so what are some of the indicators that a person has been programmed and what to watch for? Good question. So, that really depends on how much you know them, because everyone is has like their normal personality, but sometimes they can switch to another personality, and so I've had people switch in front of me, and sometimes I wasn't aware. You'll see their face looks different, they may talk different. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're programmed. They could just be DID. They might like different foods. They might dress differently. Again, they might smoke, and the main person, the presenter that is like, well, you don't smoke. If they start acting differently, something that's almost like an anomaly out of the mainstream. But a lot of this stuff, that I'm talking about regarding the programming, that type of stuff, unless you're around them, that the programming kicks in at a certain time, and you're watching them now do some type of cult ritual, or doing some type of sexual predatory thing, or causing chaos that you don't feel like it's like them, it's going to be hard to know. They may also say that they're having some very weird dreams. They may say, hey, like, I saw myself, like, this was happening to me, and I don't understand because I don't remember that stuff. Because a lot of the stuff, the programming is done in childhood, because as a child's developing, growing, their identity, that's the best time to do this type of programming, usually before you're 7 or 8 years old. So, and that's why I think that we're seeing a lot of the children disappearing, that they're allowing them through the borders and stuff like that. I don't doubt that they're doing a lot of ritual type stuff, programming type stuff to them. Obviously, there's the enemy gets power from us. Whatever we put our faith into, if we put it into God, into His Word, into doing good, God can use that to work good through us. If we put faith into evil, that's giving our faith, our energy, our power, our life force to the enemy. I was going somewhere with that, and I forgot where I was going with that. Anyways, but these people, they may have some very weird dreams. They may feel that, they're having sex with a demon god, or they're, doing some type of ritual. They could be on some, government, laboratory, or in a spaceship, or on a different planet, and so it's really hard to say. because I still sometimes have people in front of me that'll switch, and I'm like, oh, I didn't miss it. Like I didn't catch the behavior change. And sometimes there can be triggers that set these people off for them to switch. If there's something, for example, say they were being held down while they were being sexually molested, if you grab their wrists or something like that, that could trigger them into another personality coming up. And so if there is something, maybe some scientist was using a strobe light to program them, they're experimenting. And, so now that survivor, if they get around strobe lights, that could be very triggering from them. So there's a lot of triggers that these scientists, whether it's a sound, whether it's a frequency, whether it's a color, that they use to call up certain personalities. And so, again, they're very good at this whole building these split personalities from a psychology standpoint. They understand the mind, they understand the spiritual aspects, because mostly as Bible believers haven't delved so much into the spiritual aspects. I remember, even 14 years ago, I was like, are miracles real? Like, do those really happen? Yeah, like, I laugh at myself now. I was like, really? And so, even when I go and pray for people at the store, like a lot of them are like, what? Like, that's crazy. Like, you want to pray for me? Like, you expect that? It's like, well, yeah. And so there's a lot of people that go to church that they don't have the faith. And I'm trying to get people built up and trying to get, wake people up. So that's probably not a complete answer. I'll try to work on that. I don't know if I'll come up with a better answer, but I'll try to look at that. Any other questions? Okay, well then, hey, we're going to end it with that. Thank you for coming. I pray that you share this with others, again, that may not be aware of what the battle is. Again, we tend to focus on our little world a lot of times. I do. And, again, not to cause fear. I just want to get people closer to Yeshua, to again, into spiritual activation, to getting them to do whatever they were called to do in the kingdom, because that's how we win. That's how we overcome. All right. So this is Noe with Walk with Yah. You can find this ministry at www.walkwithyah, that's YAH.com. I ask you to share this ministry with others. Also pray for me, for me and my clients. And again, I just ask you to get the word out, because a lot of people don't know what it is that they're fighting. But shalom, I bless you, and just remember, maybe your miracle could be next.